The poison hit Amber 30 seconds before she was supposed to say, "I do." Her ceremonial wine had tasted wrong, bitter almonds and metal, burning down her throat like liquid fire. The crystal goblet slipped from her fingers and shattered against white marble, dark wine pooling across the altar. Then she looked up at him, at Jacob, her soon-to-be mate, the man she'd only met twice, and saw it in his eyes before her vision started to blur. He knew. He'd known exactly what was in that cup, and the only surprise on his face was that she was still standing. "Amber," her sister's voice, sharp with alarm, cut through the chaos, but Amber couldn't turn to her, couldn't do anything except lock her knees and refuse to give them the satisfaction of watching her collapse at the altar. Because that's what they wanted, wasn't it? For the half-blood girl from the lower territories to prove she never belonged here in the first place. To demonstrate that breeding program match 3841 was a mistake that needed correcting. The poison traveled faster than she expected. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as her pulse turned erratic, and the faces around her started to fracture like a broken mirror. She caught glimpses. Jacob's mother, the high matriarch, her mouth a thin line of satisfaction, the territorial council already rising from their seats, and him, the one they called the Wolf King, standing in the shadows at the back of the hall. Why was he here? Alpha King Sterling didn't attend binding ceremonies. Everyone knew that. He hadn't been seen outside the Northern Keep in 3 years, not since. Her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground, but they weren't Jacob's. Wrong scent. Cedar and winter storms. Wrong heat, too, burning through her ceremonial dress like she'd been dipped in fever. "Got you." The voice was low, rough, edged with something that might have been anger. Amber tried to focus on the face above her, but the poison had reached her brain now, turning everything soft and distant. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes like a frozen lake that could swallow you whole. The Wolf King. What the hell was he doing? "She's marked," someone gasped, a woman close by. "That's not possible," someone else said. "The ceremony wasn't completed. Look at her neck." Cold air hit her skin where her hair had fallen away. She felt it then, the impossible heat radiating from a spot just below her ear. A mark. A claiming. But that didn't make any sense because she hadn't completed the bond with Jacob, hadn't even gotten through the vows before the poison hit her bloodstream. And then the Wolf King shifted his grip on her, his thumb brushing that burning spot on her neck, and she felt it. The connection, snapping into place like a lock finding its key. No. The word echoed in her head as darkness rushed in, but whether she said it out loud or just screamed it into the void, she couldn't tell. Because the last thing she registered before, consciousness slipped away, was his voice, quiet and deadly, cutting through the fog. "Anyone who objects to my claim can take it up with me personally. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe. It will make my day." Amber woke to unfamiliar stone and firelight. Her throat felt raw, her mouth tasted like copper and ash, and every muscle in her body ached like she'd been trampled by horses. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it when the room spun sideways. "Easy." That voice again. The one from the ceremony, low and rough like gravel. She turned her head slowly and found him sitting in a chair beside the bed. The Wolf King Sterling. He looked exactly as dangerous as the rumors suggested. Tall enough to fill a doorway, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that was too sharp to be traditionally handsome, but arresting in a way that made it hard to look away. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and those pale eyes tracked her every movement like a predator assessing prey. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "My fortress. Northern Territory." That penetrated the fog in her brain. She was in the Northern Keep. The place Sterling had locked himself away in for 3 years, the place no one was allowed to enter, and she was in his bed. Amber's hand flew to her neck, fingers finding the raised mark just below her ear. It burned under her touch, warm and alive in a way that made her stomach drop. "What did you do to me?" "Saved your life," he said it matter-of-factly. "By marking me, without my consent." Something flickered in his expression. "The poison in your system would have taken you in minutes, maybe less." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "My bloodline carries old magic. I can draw toxins out through a bond, but only through a bond. So I had a choice. Let you die in front of 300 witnesses, or mark you and deal with the consequences." "Those weren't your consequences to deal with." Amber sat up fully now, ignoring the way her head swam. "That was my death. Mine. You didn't have the right." "You're correct." That stopped her. She'd been ready for him to argue, to justify, to tell her she should be grateful. Instead, he just looked at her with those unreadable eyes and agreed. "I didn't have the right," he continued. "I took something from you that I can't give back, but I'd do it again because the alternative was watching you die." His jaw tightened. "I've seen enough people die." There was something hollow and grief-worn in his voice that made Amber's anger stumble. She took a breath. "How long was I unconscious?" 2 days. The poison was aggressive. Drawing it out took time. And the mark. Real. Binding. It'll be unstable for the first lunar cycle. He stood, and Amber realized just how tall he was. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Which means you're stuck here for 28 days. If you leave my territory before the bond sets, the severed connection could kill us both." The words landed like stones. "You're saying I'm your prisoner?" "I'm saying you're alive, and we both need to stay that way." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's food on the table when you're ready. Your sister sent clothing. And before you ask, no, you can't see her yet. The Territorial Council is calling for your return to face questions about the broken match. Until I know it's safe, you stay here." He left before she could respond, the heavy door closing with a finality that made something in her chest constrict. Amber sat in the silence of his room and tried to process what had just happened. She'd gone to a ceremony expecting to bind herself to a stranger for political purposes. Instead, she'd been poisoned by that stranger and marked by another one, and now she was trapped in a fortress with a man who'd saved her life. Her hand went to her neck again, to the mark that pulsed with heat. Through it, she could feel something, a presence, distant but unmistakable. Like someone standing in the next room, close enough that you knew they were there even though you couldn't see them. Sterling. She could feel him through the bond. The realization made her skin prickle. It wasn't thoughts exactly, more like emotions, sensations. Right now she felt tension, worry maybe, and underneath it, something older and deeper that tasted like grief. She pulled her hand away from the mark like it had burned her. 28 days. She had 28 days trapped here with a man she could feel, bound to him through magic she didn't understand, while the Territorial Council decided what to do with a half-blood girl who'd been poisoned at her own mating ceremony. Amber looked around the room, stone walls, a fireplace, books stacked on every available surface, and made a decision. If she was going to be stuck here, she wasn't going to spend it hiding in his bedroom. She was going to find out exactly what happened at that ceremony, and why the reclusive Wolf King had been there at the perfect time to stop it. Amber found Sterling in his study 3 hours later, after she'd eaten, changed into the clothes Iris had sent, and spent far too long staring at her reflection in the mirror. The mark was visible above the collar of her shirt, a dark sigil that looked almost like a brand, intricate and unmistakably his. She'd tried covering it with her hair, then decided that was ridiculous and pulled her hair back into a bun instead. If she was marked, everyone was going to see it eventually. The study was exactly what she'd expected. More books, maps spread across a massive desk, papers pinned to the walls covered in notes written in sharp, angular handwriting. Sterling stood with his back to her, staring at one of the maps. "You should be resting," he said without turning around. "I was in a coma for 2 days. I'm done resting." Amber walked into the room, examining the papers on the walls. Names, dates, locations. It looked like an investigation. "What is all this? 3 years of research." "Into what?" He finally turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "The breeding program. Who runs it? How they select matches? What happens to the ones who don't work out?" His eyes went to the mark on her neck, then away. "How they cover up murders." The word hung in the air between them. "The poison," Amber said slowly. "Jacob's family tried to kill me. Is that why you were there?" I suspected, yes. Jacob's family has a pattern. Over the past decade, 5 matches involving their bloodline have ended in accidents or sudden illness. All of them were from lower territories. All of them died before the bonding ceremony could be completed. He moved to his desk, pulling out a file. "You were supposed to be number 6. Amber took the file with numb fingers. Inside were names, photographs, medical reports. 5 women, all around her age, all smiling in their photos, all dead. Why are they doing this? What's the point? Control. The breeding program was designed to promote genetic diversity across territories, but somewhere along the line, it became a tool. Upper territory families use it to prevent lower territory bloodlines from gaining power through strategic matches. If they don't like who you're matched with, they eliminate you and cite incompatibility. Amber thought about her own match. She'd been selected 3 months ago, told she was being matched with Jacob Hartwell of the Upper Territories as part of a reconciliation initiative. Bridge building between classes. She'd been so focused on what it meant. Moving up, giving her sister a better life, proving that half-bloods could belong, that she'd never questioned why Jacob's family had agreed to it. Because they never planned to let it happen. "Why do you care about the breeding program?" Sterling's expression shuddered. "That's not relevant?" Amber studied him for a moment, noting the way his jaw had tightened, the careful blankness in his eyes that felt like a shield going up. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," she said quietly. "But 3 years is a long time to dedicate to something. It feels personal." For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the window, staring out at the snow-covered mountains beyond. "I had a mate. She was from the lower territories. Redstone, on the western border. The program matched her with me, and for once it actually worked. We bonded. Started building a life." His voice was carefully controlled, each word precise. "Then the Territorial Council decided a lower territory wolf as the Northern Queen was unacceptable. They declared our match incompatible and demanded a separation." Amber's chest tightened. "So, what happened?" "She died 2 weeks later. Officially, it was a reaction to the bond-breaking procedure. Unofficially." He turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes was bleak. "I found wolfsbane in her system during the autopsy. Same, poison they used on you." The grief in his voice was so raw it hurt to hear. Amber understood now. The years of isolation, the obsessive research, the way he'd marked her without hesitation when he saw the poison taking hold. He'd watched his mate die once. He wasn't going to watch it happen again. Consent be damned. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. It's not your burden." He moved back to his desk, putting distance between them. "But that's why I was at your ceremony. I've been tracking Jacob's family for months. When I saw you were matched with them, I knew they'd try something. I just didn't know if I'd get there in time." "You did." Amber looked down at the file in her hands, at the faces of 5 women who hadn't been so lucky. "What happens now?" "Now you stay here until the bond sets and it's safe for you to leave. The council wants you for questioning, but they'll have to go through me first." "That's not what I meant." She set the file on his desk with a deliberate motion. "You've spent years collecting evidence. 5 women are dead. I was almost the 6th, and the people responsible are still running the program. What are you going to do about it?" Sterling studied her for a long moment. "What do you think I should do?" "Burn it down, all of it. The program, the council's corruption, every family that's been using matches as execution orders." She met his eyes. "But you can't do it alone. You need someone from the inside, someone who was almost killed by the system and lived to testify about it." "You want to help investigate?" "I want to stop them from killing anyone else." Amber crossed her arms. "And since I'm stuck here for 28 days anyway, I might as well make myself useful. Unless you'd prefer I spend the next month brooding in your bedroom." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "You're recovering from a near-fatal poisoning." "I'm fine now. You collapsed in my hallway 20 minutes ago. I felt it through the bond." Amber's cheeks heated. She had collapsed, briefly, when the dizziness had gotten too bad. She'd thought she was alone. "That's invasive." "That's the bond. You'll feel my pain too, eventually, once it stabilizes. We're connected now, whether either of us like it." He moved toward her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "Which means, when you push yourself too hard, I feel it. When you're in danger, I'll know. And when you're lying to me, I can tell." The air between them felt charged. Amber was acutely aware of how close he was, of the heat radiating from his body, of the way her pulse had kicked up and the knowing look in his eyes that said he felt that too. "I'm not lying," she said. "I'm determined. There's a difference." He stepped back, breaking whatever spell had formed. "You can help, but if you collapse again, you rest. No arguments." "Deal." They worked into the night. Sterling had more files than Amber had expected. Years of documentation, testimony from families of the deceased, financial records showing suspicious payments to council members. He'd been building a case, methodically and carefully, but he was missing something crucial: proof of direct orders. Everything was circumstantial, easy to explain away. "We need someone to confess," Amber said, rubbing her tired eyes. They'd been at this for hours, the fire burning low in the hearth. "Someone inside Jacob's family who knows what happened and is willing to talk. They'll never turn on each other. Family loyalty is everything to the upper territories. Then we make them." An idea was forming in Amber's mind. What if I went back, played the victim, said I didn't remember anything after the ceremony, thought I'd gotten sick, implied that maybe you took advantage of the situation to mark me? Sterling's expression hardened. "No." "It could work. They'd think I was on their side." I said no. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against stone. "You're not using yourself as bait." "Why not? I'm already the bait. I was always the bait. I'm not sending you back to people who tried to kill you so they can finish the job." His voice was sharp now, edged with something that sounded almost like fear. "The bond isn't set yet. If something happens to you, if something happens to me, you feel it. That's an advantage, not a liability." Amber stood too, frustration rising. "I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do." They stared at each other across the desk, the tension crackling between them. Through the bond, Amber could feel his emotions. Anger, yes, but underneath it was something else, protectiveness, and beneath that, terror, raw and sharp as a blade. He'd already lost someone this way. The thought of losing another person was tearing him apart. Amber's anger softened. "I'm not her," she said quietly. Sterling flinched like she'd hit him. "I know that." "Do you? Because you're looking at me like I'm about to disappear." "Maybe because in my experience, people do." He moved around the desk, closer to her. "You don't understand what it's like, feeling someone through a bond while they're dying, knowing something's wrong but not being able to reach them in time. I lived through that once. I won't." His voice broke slightly. "I can't do it again." The vulnerability in his admission made Amber's chest ache. She could feel it through the bond now, the old grief mixing with new fear, the way caring about her terrified him because he knew how badly loss could break a person. "Then help me make sure it doesn't come to that," she said. "We investigate together, carefully, no suicide missions, but we don't stop and we don't let them win because we're too afraid of what might happen." Sterling looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Together," he agreed, "but we do this smart." They fell into a rhythm over the next week. Amber would wake to find breakfast already laid out in the study. Sterling's doing, though he never mentioned it. They'd spend mornings going through files, afternoons sending carefully worded letters to contacts Sterling had across the territories, evenings strategizing. The fortress was massive and mostly empty, but they occupied the same spaces, the study, the library, the dining hall that echoed with their voices. And slowly, carefully, the bond between them grew stronger. Amber started noticing things. The way Sterling always sat with his back to the wall, years of caution ingrained into habit. How he took his coffee black, but added honey to his tea. The small scar above his left eyebrow that he touched when he was thinking. He had a dry sense of humor that surprised her, sharp and a little dark, emerging during long hours of tedious research. And she noticed the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like he was trying to memorize her face, like he was afraid she'd vanish. For her part, Sterling was learning her too. He'd started leaving books on her nightstand, histories of the territories, accounts of the program's founding, novels he thought she'd like. He knew she bit her lip when she was concentrating, that she paced when she was frustrated, that she couldn't sleep past dawn even when she was exhausted. The bond made them intimate in ways that had nothing to do with touch. When Amber had a nightmare about the poisoning, she woke to find Sterling at her door, drawn there by her fear. When he worked too late and skipped meals, she felt the gnawing hunger and brought him food. They were learning each other's rhythms, their patterns, the shape of each other's pain. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being known. The tension between them grew sharper. It happened in small moments. Sterling's hand on her lower back as they navigated the narrow library stairs. The way he'd steady her when dizziness still hit occasionally, his grip firm and warm. How they'd sit close at his desk, shoulders nearly touching, and neither would move away. Amber caught herself watching his hands as he turned pages, remembering how gentle they'd been when he'd checked her mark that first night. 10 days into her stay, the snow began falling heavily outside. They were in the library, surrounded by books, when the lights flickered. A storm was rolling in. "We should head back before it gets worse," Sterling said, already gathering the documents they'd been reviewing. But when they reached the corridor, the temperature had plummeted. The storm had come faster than expected, and the stone walls were radiating cold. Amber shivered despite her sweater. Sterling noticed immediately. "Here." He shrugged off his coat and held it out. "I'm all right." "Amber." She took the coat, and when she put it on, it was warm from his body heat and smelled like cedar. Something in her chest ached. They made it back to the study, where Sterling immediately built up the fire. Amber stood close to it, trying to chase away the chill, but the cold had seeped deep. Her hands were shaking slightly. "You're freezing." Sterling appeared beside her with a blanket. "Sit." "I'm not." "Don't argue. You're still recovering, and your body doesn't regulate temperature well after severe poisoning." There was worry in his voice beneath the command. Amber sat on the couch in front of the fire, and Sterling wrapped the blanket around her shoulders with surprising gentleness. But when he moved to step back, she caught his wrist. "Stay." He went very still. "Amber, I'm cold, you're warm, and the bond is making me feel like I need you close anyway. Just stay, please." For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth even through the blanket. They sat in silence, watching the fire, and gradually Amber's shaking subsided. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of this. I know I can be abrasive, but you saved my life. You've given me shelter, helped me investigate. I was angry about the mark, but I understand why you did it." Sterling was quiet for a long moment. "I took your choice away. You don't have to thank me for that." "Maybe not for that part, but for the rest of it, yes, I do." She turned to look at him, finding him already watching her. "You could have just kept me here like a prisoner, made me wait out the time in isolation. Instead, you've treated me like a partner." "You are a partner. You're—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd be afraid, who'd count down the days until they could leave and never look back." His eyes searched her face. "But you're here, investigating a conspiracy, pushing yourself too hard, and sitting too close to me when you should probably be keeping your distance." "Why should I keep my distance?" "Because I'm already more attached to you than I should be." The admission tumbled out of him. "You're temporary, Amber. In 18 days, the bond will set and you can leave safely. Go back to your sister, your life. But the longer you're here, the harder—" He stopped himself. "The harder what?" "The harder it's going to be to let you go." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Amber's pulse kicked up, and she knew he felt it through the bond. She should pull back, create distance, protect them both from whatever was becoming. Instead, she leaned closer. "What if I don't want you to let me go?" Sterling's eyes darkened. "Don't say that, unless you mean it." "I do mean it." Her hand was still on his wrist, and she slid it up to his forearm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "I'm not staying because of the bond. I'm staying because of you. When I'm with you, I feel like I'm choosing something for the first time in my life. And I know it's complicated, and I know you're terrified of losing someone again, but—" He kissed her. Or maybe she kissed him. Later, Amber wouldn't be able to say who moved first, only that suddenly they were kissing, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness, while his other hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer. The blanket fell away forgotten. The bond flared between them, amplifying everything. She could feel his want, sharp and desperate, mixing with her own. Could feel the way he was still holding back, still afraid of breaking her, even as his control fractured. Amber kissed him harder, her fingers tangling in his hair, and felt him shudder. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "We shouldn't do this," he said, voice wrecked. "Probably not." "You're still recovering. The bond isn't stable. This could complicate everything." "It definitely will. And in 18 days, you might leave anyway." "Maybe." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Or maybe I'll stay. Maybe we figure out what this is when we're not in crisis mode. Maybe we investigate the conspiracy, take down the council, and then see what we are when the world isn't ending." Sterling studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. Then he kissed her again, softer this time. 18 days. And then we choose what comes next. They spent the rest of the evening by the fire, Amber tucked against Sterling's side, his arm around her shoulders. The storm raged outside, but inside, wrapped in warmth and each other, Amber felt something she hadn't felt in years. The next morning brought news that shattered their brief peace. A messenger arrived from the Territorial Council with a formal summons. Amber was to appear for tribunal in 7 days to answer questions about the broken match contract and the circumstances of her bonding to Sterling. Failure to appear would result in sanctions against both her family and the Northern Territory. "They're threatening Iris," Amber said, hands clenched around the summons. "If I don't go, this lands on her." Sterling was pacing his study, fury radiating through the bond. "It's a trap. They know you'll come if your sister's at risk." "Then it's a trap I'm walking into." Amber set the summons down with deliberate calm. "This is what we've been waiting for, isn't it? A chance to confront them publicly, to put everything on record. You'll be walking into a room full of council members, half of whom are probably complicit in the murders. Jacob's family will be there. They'll try to discredit you, paint you as unreliable. Let them try." Amber moved around the desk to face him. "We have evidence, we have documentation, and we have me, a survivor who's willing to testify. This is our shot." Sterling stopped pacing, his eyes searching her face. Through the bond, she felt his fear warring with his logic. He knew she was right. He hated it, but he knew. "I'm coming with you," he said finally. "That's probably what they want. Get us both in one room, make accusations, try to invalidate the evidence because we're bonded." "I don't care what they want." His voice was steel. "You're not walking into that tribunal alone." They argued about it for another hour, but Sterling was immovable. In the end, Amber gave in, mostly because she could feel how much the thought of her facing the council alone was tearing him apart. The next 6 days were a blur of preparation. Sterling called in favors, contacted allies across the territories, built their case into something airtight. Amber practiced her testimony until she could recite it in her sleep, every detail of the poisoning committed to memory. But beneath the preparation, there was an edge of desperation to everything they did. The tribunal was in 7 days. The bond would set in 12. They were running out of time, and the world outside the fortress was closing in. On the 5th night, Amber couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of her room. She'd moved back to the guest quarters after that night by the fire, some instinct telling her they both needed space to think clearly, and watch the snow fall. A knock at her door made her turn. Sterling stood in the doorway, looking as restless as she felt. Couldn't sleep either? Too much noise in my head. He moved into the room, and they stood together at the window. Are you afraid? He asked quietly. Terrified, she admitted. Not of the tribunal, of what comes after. We expose the conspiracy, hopefully dismantle the program, and then what? My life before this, my sister, my home, feels like it belonged to someone else. I don't know if I can go back to it. You don't have to. She looked up at him. What are you saying? I'm saying stay. His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, and the tenderness in the gesture made her chest ache. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But these past 2 weeks, having you here, it's the first time since Lyra died that this place has felt like more than a tomb. Lyra. He'd never said his mate's name before. The fact that he was saying it now, that he was comparing what he felt for Amber to what he'd lost, was significant. I want to stay, Amber said. But I need to know this is real, that it's not just the crisis pushing us together, or you trying to replace someone you loved. You're nothing like her. Sterling's voice was firm. Lyra was... She was soft, gentle, saw the good in everyone. Your fire and fury and sharp edges, you challenge me, argue with me, refuse to let me hide. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm trying to figure out how to let myself feel something again without being terrified it'll destroy me when it ends. What if it doesn't end? That's what scares me most. Amber reached up and took his hand, pressing it to the mark on her neck. The bond flared warm between them. Then be scared with me. We'll figure it out together. This time, when he kissed her, there was no hesitation, no holding back, just desperate certainty and the knowledge that whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd faced everything else, side by side, fighting. The tribunal was held in the grand hall of the Territorial Council, a massive stone structure that had stood for centuries. Amber walked in with her head high, Sterling at her side, and felt the weight of all their eyes on her. The council sat in a semicircle at the front of the hall, 12 alphas representing the major territories. Jacob and his family occupied seats to the left, their expressions carefully neutral. The gallery was packed with witnesses, nobles, lower territory representatives who'd come to see justice or a spectacle. Iris was there too, in the front row, and when their eyes met, Amber saw fear and pride in equal measure. The proceedings began with formalities, the reading of charges, the explanation of protocol. Then Jacob's family attorneys stood to present their case. This tribunal is to address a violation of sacred law, the attorney began, her voice carrying across the hall. A binding ceremony was interrupted, a match contract broken, and a mark placed without proper authority. The accused, Amber Celine, stands bonded to Alpha King Sterling despite being lawfully matched to Jacob Hartwell. We demand an explanation. Amber stepped forward when called. Her hands were steady despite her racing heart. I'm happy to provide one. I was poisoned during my mating ceremony. The wine I drank contained poison, a lethal combination designed to kill shifters. I collapsed before the bonding could be completed. Alpha King Sterling intervened and used his bloodline's magic to draw out the toxins, which required a bond. He saved my life. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Jacob's mother stood abruptly. Lies. My son would never. I have the medical reports. Sterling's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He stepped forward, placing documents on the council's table. Amber's blood work from the night of the ceremony. Toxicology confirmed poisonous compounds in lethal concentrations, unless you're suggesting she poisoned herself. Perhaps she did, to escape a match she didn't want, to trap a king. Jacob's mother's voice was acid. We all know what lower territory wolves will do for power. The insult landed like a slap. Amber felt Sterling's fury through the bond, but she kept her own expression calm. This was what they'd expected. Character assassination, class warfare, anything to avoid the truth. If I wanted to trap a king, there were easier ways than near-fatal poisoning. Amber's voice was steady. But since we're discussing what people will do for power, let's talk about your family's track record. She nodded to Sterling, who placed another file on the table. This one was thicker, more damning. 5 women, Amber continued, all matched to your family over the past decade, all from lower territories, all dead before their bonding ceremonies could be completed. She listed their names, watching Jacob's mother's face pale with each one. Marissa, found dead of natural causes 3 days before her ceremony. Sienna, accidental fall down the stairs. Rhea, sudden onset of mysterious illness. Should I continue? The hall erupted in shocked whispers. The council members were leaning forward now, examining the documents Sterling had provided. Jacob's attorney tried to recover. Tragic accidents, but hardly. All of them showed traces of wolfsbane in their systems during autopsy, Sterling interrupted. I had their bodies exhumed and retested. The results are in that file, along with communications between Jacob's mother and certain council members discussing how to handle undesirable matches. The silence that followed was deafening. The head of the territorial council, an older alpha named Torin, held up one of the documents. His expression was grave. These are serious accusations. If proven true, this isn't just about one broken match. This is systematic murder, corruption of the breeding program itself. Which is why we're demanding a full investigation, Sterling said. Not just into the Hartwell family, but into every match that's ended in accidental death or incompatibility. The program was designed to strengthen our species through genetic diversity. Instead, it's been weaponized to maintain class divisions and eliminate threats to upper territory power. Jacob finally stood. He looked smaller than Amber remembered, his face drawn. This is ridiculous. You have no proof that I specifically... You watched me drink that wine. Amber's voice cut through his protest. You knew what was in it. I saw it in your eyes before I collapsed. I didn't know, Jacob said, but his voice wavered. I thought. My mother said it was just something to make you sick, to delay the ceremony so we could... Jacob, shut up. His mother's command was sharp, but it was too late. To delay the ceremony so you could what? Torin pressed. Finish the job later. Make it look more natural? Jacob's composure cracked. I didn't want to kill her. I just didn't want to be bound to... He stopped, realizing what he was admitting. The gallery exploded. Council members were shouting for order. Jacob's mother was screaming at her son to stop talking. And through it all, Amber stood still, watching the conspiracy unravel in real time. Torin slammed his gavel down repeatedly until the hall quieted. Enough. This tribunal is suspended pending a full investigation into these allegations. The Hartwell family will be detained for questioning. And as for you... He looked at Amber and Sterling. Your bond will be recognized as legitimate given the circumstances. The match contract between Amber Celine and Jacob Hartwell is hereby declared void. Relief flooded through Amber so intensely that Sterling's hand came to her elbow, steadying her. Through the bond, she felt his own relief mixed with vindication, but Torin wasn't finished. However, The broader accusations against the breeding program require extensive investigation. I'm calling for an emergency session of the full Territorial Council. Until then, all pending matches are suspended. The hall erupted again, but Amber barely heard it. They'd done it. The conspiracy was exposed. Jacob's family would face justice, and the program, the system that had treated her and countless others as political pawns, was finally being questioned. Iris fought through the crowd to reach her, pulling Amber into a fierce hug. "You're alive. You're safe. That's all that matters." "I'm more than safe," Amber murmured against her sister's shoulder. "I'm free." The aftermath took weeks. Jacob's mother confessed under questioning, implicating 3 council members and 2 other Upper Territory families in the conspiracy. The breeding program was officially dissolved pending restructure. Matches could still be made, but they would be voluntary, with both parties having the right to refuse without consequences. It was a victory, but it came with complications. Amber's testimony had made her famous, or infamous, depending on who you asked. She was hailed as a hero by Lower Territory families, vilified as a troublemaker by Upper Territory conservatives. Amid all the chaos, she stayed in the Northern Keep with Sterling, watching winter turn toward early spring. The T-28 days had passed. The bond was set, stable, permanent, unless they both chose to break it. Amber could leave now if she wanted. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Mornings in the library, afternoons training together in the courtyard, evenings by the fire. The tension between them had evolved into something deeper. They'd kissed again, more than once, but they hadn't pushed further. Both of them were still figuring out what they were, what they wanted this to be. "You could go visit Iris," Sterling said one evening as they sat in his study. "The bond is strong enough now that distance won't hurt." "I know." Amber looked up from the book she'd been reading. "I will, soon. But right now, I'm exactly where I want to be." Something shifted in his expression. "Are you?" "Because you've been here for 6 weeks, and we still haven't talked about what happens next. Long term, I mean." Amber set her book aside. "What do you want to happen?" "I want you to stay. Permanently. Not as a guest, not as someone recovering from trauma, but as..." He stopped, struggling with the words. "As what?" "As my partner, my mate, my..." He took a breath. "My choice. The one I'm choosing, freely, with no program or crisis or magical intervention forcing my hand." Amber's heart was pounding. "That's a big commitment. I know it's fast, and I know you have every right to need more time. But these past weeks, having you here, it's shown me what my life could be. Not just survived, but lived. I'm choosing you, Amber, if you'll have me." She stood, crossing the space between them. Sterling rose to meet her, and they stood face to face in the firelight. "I'm not Lyra," Amber said quietly, echoing words from weeks ago. "I'm never going to be soft or gentle or easy. I don't want you to be. I'm going to argue with you, challenge your decisions, push back when I think you're wrong. I'm counting on it. And I'm damaged. I've got trust issues and control issues, and I'm still figuring out who I am outside of being someone's match or someone's sister or someone's problem." Sterling's hands came up to frame her face. "Then figure it out here, with me." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I'm choosing you, Amber. The woman who refused to stay down when she was poisoned, who makes me laugh and argues with me and makes this fortress feel like home for the first time in 3 years. It's you." Amber's throat was tight. "I'm terrified." "Me too. What if this feeling doesn't last? Then we'll deal with it, but I'd rather risk it and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." His forehead rested against hers. Stay. Choose me back. Amber thought about the girl she'd been 6 weeks ago, walking into a ceremony to bind herself to a stranger, accepting her fate because she'd never known she had a choice. Then she thought about the woman she was now, scarred and marked and free, standing in a fortress with a man who saw every sharp edge of her and wanted her anyway. I'm staying, she said. I choose you.